So how does a cook stove like this work? On, forward. There's a firebox, multiple vents, inner air passageways, all sorts of secret nooks and elements these cook stoves have. Turn the oven off, back. This tool was a revolution in technology. Catching your skirt alight while leaning over a campfire was a very real horror. Large open cooking fires were a leading cause of death for women. But then a tool was invented, and it contained that fire, channeled it, allowed you to cook daily meals, make medicines, preserve foods. So how does a cook stove work? What tricks are there for firewood? Because it's not just shoving in a log and walking away. Let's talk how to ingeniously use ashes for the best baking. If you were plopped down in a cabin on the prairie, let's show how you'd use this cook stove to survive. Because it wasn't that long ago that our grandmothers relied on this technology to cook 3 meals a day. Here we go, Cook Stove 101. Now this stove is not supposed to smoke like this. Most days it doesn't, but why is it doing it? Well, it is a dead still day outside, no wind. This causes the chimney pipe to draw poorly, hence smoke in the house. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it highlights how you were tied to the weather, always. But that was nothing compared to what the generation before had to contend with. Martha was bending over her open cooking fire on the 49ers trail. She was distracted by the horses that the wind gusts had just spooked. Her young daughter, Julia, was underfoot. One gust of that wind, a rolling of a few coals, and she would never feel those hot embers rest against her boot and long apron. Luckily for my great-grandmother, Julia, that was not the fate of the family that day. But her mother would end up not surviving the journey. Not because of an accident with the cook fires, but from the tragedy of a different pioneer reality. But Julia left a letter behind, a handwritten letter, recounting the daily efforts of 1800s life. And a cook stove like this, or a bit more primitive version, this was something many a pioneer, many a homesteader tried to bring with them west, but often it didn't work out. They had to lighten the wagons by leaving behind a great many things. No doubt they wished many times they had them again, but of course it must have been the only thing they could do to save their lives. Sometimes the men would start a fire by taking a stone and striking the flint from their gun, and the sparks from it would kindle a fire. They would use this method often for making fires. We aren't talking about 400 years ago here. Julia, who lived this whole adventure, hand-wrote this letter to my grandfather, and this was just the blink of an eye ago in history. Now, every cook stove I've cooked on is different. I've probably cooked on about 5 different brands, ages, and the oven is never in the same spot. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's back here where you lift up on a vent. They're all different, but the principle's the same. On, off. That's what that iron lever does. It opens a vent down low in the stove, pulling and wrapping the flames around the sides of the oven. But there's more to an oven than this hidden vent. There's a trick to know about the ashes. Otherwise, your food will burn horribly. So the ashes in the oven are not a waste. They're not to be thrown out. They're even a bit of a critical tool in the cooking process. And this fine layer of ash on top of the oven is critical. Basically, it's insulation. If you cleaned it all out, the top of your oven would get super hot from the flames. My first loaf of bread in this oven after we restored it, well, the top was black and the inside dough. I hadn't built up my ash layer yet. This tool here is used to reach way back inside the cook stove when the ashes get too deep, which is maybe after so many months or even a year of use, depending. And it allows you to scrape excess ash from the top, knock it down the sides, and scrape it off the bottom of the oven through this little clean out door. Earlier this year, we had a black starling fly down the chimney pipe, which was cold, no fire going in it, and it flew around the inner hidden chambers of the stove and then pushed its way out this clean out door, safe and sound. So the inside of this iron and steel stove actually has a lot of air pockets and chambers. It's not solid. After all, a fire relies on one very critical thing: oxygen. There's vents at the top, There's vents at the bottom, and some people even put vents in their chimney pipe itself to regulate how much oxygen that fire is getting. Because how much heat your wood box is throwing out is very dependent on how much airflow is getting in. Part of it is what type of wood you use, but a huge part of it is how much oxygen your firebox gets. And that's why these stoves have just so many different vents, different ways to control a fire. So you can see this tool has a square bit on the face of it. And that fits onto here. And this is how we adjust the grates from wood to coal, because they're different, they're not the same. Really work though, not in this oven. Now these old grates are a little seized up, but I used to have a Monarch cook stove, a really beautiful one. It even had a wooden towel rack on it. And that's the stove I cooked on for 8 years living off grid. And that one had smooth, beautiful grates that would flip from wood to coal. And the coal really did save my life. I would not have made it through those long, deep -40 Montana nights without coal and without a cook stove that could burn coal. Because my heating stove was just wood. I burned coal in my cook stove. Now this stove in particular has a vent today that it didn't have back in history. And that's because it had a boiler on it originally. So it had a pipe that came out of here, and there was a big cistern of water on the side. And as that firebox got hot, that water would heat up and you'd have hot water on demand. Over the years, that boiler box has disappeared. So we just have a nice big hole sticking out of the back of this that lets in a little too much oxygen to the firebox. Hence why this stove tends to burn pretty hot, kind of tough to regulate. Not ideal, but not the end of the world. Now there's actually 3 warming ovens on a cook stove like this. So they're not baking ovens. They never get hot enough to actually cook your food. But there are 1, 2, 3 warming ovens. Now, a lot of people may have used those for storage. It was a great spot, right? No mice could get into these iron boxes. It might have been a really good place to dry certain things because you'd have that dry wood heat cooking around. And then you'd also have these warming trivets. So these were the perfect spot to put your boiling kettle of water, your coffee pot, somewhere off the heat of the stove, but still nice and warm. There were just so many little tricks and advantages to a cook stove like this that a campfire or a fireplace, boy, it would struggle to provide. This was exciting stuff. So when this invention came along and people had their own personal oven at home, that was relatively safe. There's no open fire here. It's all contained. That was so big. That technology was so mind-blowing. There's a great Laura Ingalls quote from the end of her life where she said that Aladdin with his magic lamp couldn't give women any more freedom than what all these new technologies did. The cook stove, eventually the dishwasher. I mean, holy smokes, the washing machine. Think of the rapid change in lifestyle, the amount of hard labor saved. This was a time of optimism. These were revolutions that we can't really understand today. I think it's why people were so positive about the future, because they remember just one generation before how hard baking bread was, how hard laundry was, washing dishes where you had to haul the water and heat it up over a fire. To go from one generation with that to the next generation with this, it was pure revolution. And you can see why people saw the future as so full of promise. Sometimes I wish we lived in an age where that was the mentality. Back to the firebox of this stove. We burn wood out here. Hence the big metal stovepipe chimney we installed for it. All that heat and smoke has to exit somewhere, and ours goes out straight through the roof, which is always something in the back of your mind when cooking with one of these. Are there any embers caught up there? Is the wind gonna carry that smoke up and out? Your mind's never fully at ease. Now, we don't have oak, we don't have ash, we have pine, and sometimes if we're really lucky, fir. But to start this stove, it's very fiddly. Now people, city people, sometimes think, I could start a fire, no problem. Well, I'm here to tell you, having run a rental cabin for guests, that many a person has no idea how to start a fire and will in fact look incredibly foolish doing it wrong. One of our guests set a whole matchbox alight in their second attempt. Now, I have looked just as foolish learning to use this cook stove, but luckily I'm out here, usually alone. A couple sheets of newspaper usually does the trick. Or if no paper, then very finely shaved bits of sapwood also work great. Dry pine needles too. But dry is the key word in all this, especially with wood. The tree you chop down this year is only good to burn next year. So you have to always be thinking and working a year ahead. You'll notice I opened that bottom vent below the firebox when I lit it. And after, 10 minutes or so, I shut it. This firebox gets plenty of air without any help, but each stove is different. Okay, so we've covered the fact that this is a wood-fired contraption. You can cook on it, you can bake in it. It has a chimney, warming ovens, multiple vents all over it. We even talked how important ashes are as part of the cooking process. Not to mention you can collect them to make lye for washing and all your other household needs, nice and easy. So what else? Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what cookware you needed for a stove like this, because cookware, it was changing too. Okay, so you have a cook stove like this. You have it, you're excited to use it, you understand the mechanics of it, but the cookware that you have to use is very particular. Now, it got easier. You didn't have to have cookware that was quite so robust. Your Dutch ovens didn't need to have feet anymore. You could have flat, smooth bottom things, smooth bottom skillets, no more spider skillets. You could have beautiful copper pots, nice, thin, smooth copper lined with tin. Those are made perfectly for big, flat cast iron surfaces. So the cookware with these started to change. But we weren't quite to the stage of Pyrex and glass bakeware. And we've learned that one the hard way out here. We had all our friends come out for Clayton's birthday party. You know, in the hustle and bustle, someone set their Pyrex pan of cornbread on this cook stove. Well, it's not like a modern cooktop or oven where maybe this burner's hot, but the other side of it is cold. This whole thing gets hot. And that Pyrex pan shattered into 1,000 glass pieces. So these stoves are more elegant and much more smooth than the campfire, but they aren't at the stage yet of the electric cooktop. So this little bit of technology, it's just that first step into the modern world. First iterations of what we use today. We may flick on a burner or turn a knob for electricity, but the shape, the idea, the ovens, the flat top, it's basically the same. This is just generation one of today's cooktops. So you're probably thinking, well, we don't need these anymore, right? These are just antiques from a bygone era. Their day is done. But I will tell you this, cooking on a cook stove like this, it will yield you the best breads of your life. And it's not because it adds any smoky flavor. It doesn't do that. That firebox is pretty well contained. What it does do is give you a searing hot surface on the top that creates that caramelized bit, that crust, that beautiful edge of flavor around any food you're making. So these are absolute flavor machines. But I know a lot of you out there, you still cook on these. You keep one of these in your house. And for me, I cooked exclusively on one of these for years, and then I went for a period of time not having one, and I missed it. I missed it so much. So to have this moment where I can cook on it again, that is a true luxury and a true gift. So I am grateful every time I get to come out here and cook with a tool like this, because there is a magic to it. There is something special that happens. If you ever get a chance to try one of these, grab it with both hands. But like I always say to people, the physical comforts of our lives have gotten so much easier. But what have we lost? What have we given up in order to get the easiness? And I think it's pretty fair to say we've given up family. We've given up working together as a family. It used to be you really needed each other. We still need each other, but we're all doing it in such a disconnected way. But I won't rant on. If nothing else, I will say these old tools, these can teach us about a moment just a minute ago in history. We're talking 3-4 generations ago. This is what daily life took. to forget what that was like is to forget a huge part of who we are and how we got here. Because you never know, we may have to go back, and it'd be a shame to forget a tool like this. So thanks for hanging out in the cabin with us, for looking into a deep dive on these stoves. There's more that could be said about them, of course. There's lots more technical detail, but I'm not gonna get out the borescope and dig too deep into it. I will leave that to past episodes where we've talked about this and gone deep into it when we first cleaned it and restored it, because we had to really clean out those vents. We had to call in Uncle Pete the engineer and really dive deep into this thing. So if you're interested in those episodes, I'll put our deep dive of restoring this up on the screen, as well as the story of why we named this stove Julia and the ancestor who came west in that 49ers wagon train, and the many adventures and tragedies she had along the way. Cheers, everybody. Come on, man.